Alrighty. Welcome, everybody. Thank you all for joining. For those that joined live, thank you for all those that came at a later date and listened to this this class at a whatever you're listening to it. The truth is, I always find it very fascinating how, sometimes you look at people listen to, let's say, a class about Tisha, a class about mourning, like in a month from now, which is something very I can't do that. Whatever reason, but I really do appreciate the people that are able to do that. So thank you for those who are listening now, and for all those that came live, especially those that came live, and for all those that listen to whenever you are listening to this. Tonight we are learning. We are learning Lefuah Shlema to Avram Yaakov Ben Yal and to Chava Bat Chaya Esther, as well as Leilu Nishmat to Avram ben Cham Yehuda and Yechaskel ben Avraham. We are also learning tonight. Just give me a second. I didn't realize I did not write this. We're also learning for Refuah Shlema for Nechama Bas Sarah, and there's one more. That's Refuah Shlema, as well as there's another Le'ila Nishmas. And give me Lila Nishmas, also to Sarah Bas Nechama. Okay, so whenever we get into Tisha B'Av, whenever we get into this this period of time in the Jewish calendar, it's something that I try to do when I give the classes, is to bring people into a perspective on how to kind of like deal in these days. I feel, and again, from what I speak to people and what I hear from everybody, it's a difficult time, not only because it's a difficult time, but also because people have a hard time connecting. People have a hard time, okay, like it's Tisha B'Av, right? So most people, let's say on Tisha B'Av, be like, okay, so how do I get like just through it? Okay, so if I do X, Y, and Z, I'm gonna listen to Torah anytime from this point to this point, then I'm gonna take a nap from this point to this point, and then hopefully the fast will be over. And the day kind of gets away from us, and we tend to forget the main purpose of the day, and that is to mourn for the Beis HaMikdash. So one of the things that I look to is ways that you're able to connect, meaning the ways that you're able to go and you're able to feel this in an emotional. There's usually two aspects that I like to focus on. One in the emotional aspect, and number two in the aspect of how do we go and how do we improve ourselves. This happens to be something that I always try to do in almost all my classes. So I was thinking about what I was going to speak about, and then I came across a fascinating piece of Torah from Rabbi Shimshon pincus that I'll be honest with you, I have it was a huge chiddush for me. And it's something that I decided to build a share around and to speak about it tonight. Something that it literally, in all the years and all the Tisha B'Avs that I've never even, like, it was never even a consideration for me. So I'm sure for many people it's going to be a very big chiddush this class this year. So the Gemara in Chagigah on page 5b says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that God cries over the destruction of the Jewish people. Now, at face value, okay, it seems very, very straightforward that God cries because we're in galus, we're in exile. We don't have the Shekhinah's in exile. We're in exile. We don't have the Beis HaMikdash. We don't have even what's going on now. We could see how the reality of what exile means in the war in Eretz Yisrael. However, we also know that the Torah is eternal. The Torah lasts forever. And if it says that God is mourning or crying over the destruction of the Jewish people, that means that it's an everlasting mourning. It's an everlasting crying. So when we think of the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, it's a passing matter, meaning that we're waiting for the third Beis HaMikdash. We're waiting for the third temple to be rebuilt. And then, as the pasuk in Tehillim tells us in chapter 126, verse 2, tells us, "Oz Yemale Schach Pinu," then our mouth is going to fill with laughter, meaning there's going to be joyful laughter, because we'll realize once we have the third Beis HaMikdash that everything that happened, all the events that happened that looked very bad, was really for the best, was really for the good, and it becomes clear, and this arouses within us this joy of laughter, and will bring us to a level of an appreciation, of an understanding, and of happiness. And we know also at the end of the kinos, Megillas Eichah ends with a consolation from a pasuk in Tehillim, chapter 90, verse 15. Samchenu ki mois inisanu, shnois re'inu ra'ah. Rejoice according to the days that you afflicted us, the years that we saw evil. Meaning that we know that the exile, galus, is temporary. It will end with everlasting joy. So when we think of the exile, we know that it's a temporary, although it's a very long temporary, it's been many years, and we are waiting for the redemption, but we know that it is temporary. There is going to be an end to it. However, so here's where the question arises. So as human beings, we cry over the present situation because we see only present. We don't see the future. We can read about the past. We can understand the past, but we basically dwell in those two time zones, right? The past and the present. We don't know what's in the future. But God knows the past, present, and future. It's all laid out in front of God as if it's right in front, right? There's no time in heaven, so everything is right in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So if God sees the end, God sees the past, God sees the middle, where the present, where we are, again, right here in our timeline, then how and why is God mourning and God crying over the destruction of the Jewish people? What does God have to cry over? HaKadosh Baruch Hu sees the end. HaKadosh Baruch Hu sees the salvation. It's like right there, right? If you know the ending to something, even if it may look bad right now, but you know in 5 minutes it's all going to be over and you know it's all going to be okay, there's no mourning to it. So what is God mourning over the destruction of the Jewish people? What is God mourning over the destruction? Because we know that it's short term. So Rabbi Shimshon pincus explains that there's a difference between the community and the individual. Meaning, as a community, as the Klal Yisrael at large, the Jewish people will be redeemed. As a nation, we will get out of the exile. The third temple will come. Mashiach will come. All the good stuff is coming. However, the problem arises regarding the individual. Not everybody is going to be part of that all welcoming, all amazing, the days are filled with laughter. That's not what's going to come, for everybody. So that as a community, as a Klal Yisrael, as a nation, yes, we will be saved. But as an individual, that is what God cries over. And Rabbi Shimshon pincus explains that Chazal lists those who have no share in the world to come, no portion in the world to come, and nothing can be done for them, meaning they no longer belong to the Jewish people. So the Rambam, Maimonides in Hilchos Tshuva, the third parak, lists a whole list of people. We spoke about this. This is years ago. Probably one of my first classes. We spoke about all the people that have no share in the world to come. So we know, like, for example, there's a category of minim. Minim is one who says that there's no God, or that they say that there's two gods, or that God has a body, or God serves as an intermediary. Right? A lot of these are very Christian related. Then there's apikarsim, one who denies a prophecy of Moshe Rabbeinu, denies that that God is not aware of the deeds, of the actions of men. The Rambam lists a whole list of things that cause many to sin, people that deny the Torah. And by the way, these are not just like issues of like yesteryear. These are very, very current issues, like people that deny the Torah. Originally, how did people deny the Torah? So you have, for example, the Karaites. The Karaites would deny the oral law. They only keep the written law. And there was once a Karaite that went and he wanted to debate the rabbi. And not just a regular debate to say who's right. He wanted to debate it in front of the king. So he orchestrates and organizes this debate in front of the king. And in this particular king's palace, it sounds like it was more in a Muslim country, just from the information that you'll soon hear. It was that when you get into the palace, you have to take off your shoes. You can't go with shoes. So when the Karaite and the rabbi came, they both took off their shoes, and the Karaite continued walking towards the courtroom where the king is going to reside, and the Karaite's going to claim his claim, the rabbi's going to claim his claim, and the king's going to decide who is right. So the Karaite takes off his shoes, walks into the courtroom. The rabbi takes off his shoes, picks him up, holds him close to him, and then he walks into the courtroom. And the king is looking, and it doesn't say anything. But the Karaite starts off speaking, and he says, "Listen, He says, my dear king, this is like proof enough. Look at how old-fashioned this guy is, this rabbi is, the Orthodox, is. They're scared that, somebody's going to go and steal his shoes. That we're in the king's palace. What is he scared about? Why is he holding the shoes? So the rabbi says, my dear king, he says, I would like to explain why I'm holding my shoes. It has nothing to do with you, nothing to do with your palace. I have complete faith in you. I'm not nervous or worried that anybody's going to steal my shoes. But what I'm nervous about is the Karaite over here. He's going to steal my shoes. And the king is puzzled. The Karaite's puzzled. The rabbi says, let me explain. He says, when Moshe Rabbeinu was by the burning bush, by the sneh, he had to take off his shoes. But it doesn't say that he put his shoes back on. He says, you want to know why he didn't put his shoe back on? Because a Karaite was watching, and he ran up, and he took the shoes, and he ran away. And that's why I'm very nervous that this Karaite is going to go. Is going to take my shoes. So this Karaite all of a sudden starts screaming. He says, he's a liar. I could prove it to you. He says there was no Karaites in those days. They never even existed. They only started only a few hundred years ago. This is a very new movement. And he says that, and then all of a sudden the rabbi says, and this is my proven point. And this is my final, my only argument that I have against these Karaites. He says they just started. They don't know anything about Judaism. They started making things up. They weren't even by Moshe Rabbeinu. They weren't by the Har Sinai. They weren't there. They only started many, many, many years later. And hence, that's how you know who's real and who's not, who was original, who came here in the beginning, and who all of a sudden came along and started making all the reasons, all the excuses of showing, oh yeah, this is what the real Judaism is all about. When the king heard this, the king immediately dismissed the case. So when we look at and we hear the story, we think about, okay, that's a cool, like it's in the older days, like it sounds, great, like they got the Karaite, got that. But really, he said the same thing happens in our day and age. It's just a different face. Okay, so maybe it's not the Orthodox with the Karaites or the Tzedukim, or it's the same argument. Now it's science. Now this is what's going on. It's science. If science is not corroborating, if science doesn't prove what the Torah is saying, then must be what the Torah is saying is false. So it's same argument, but with a different context. And again, the answer is very simple, because science is constantly changing. Science is something, we tend to confuse science with facts. Science is only a fact until we learn the other facts, and then that fact becomes null and void, and then becomes the new fact. Science is constantly changing. We're constantly learning new things, and so whenever we're hearing or we're learning about something, it's only based off the information that we have today. The information that we have 100 years ago, 1,000 years ago is very different than the information that we have today, and of course, it's going to be very different when we have in 1,000 years from now. So it's the same argument, but with a different context. And these are people that deny the Torah. These are people that have no share in the world to come, meaning they have nothing there. And this, and we're going to get soon a little bit more in depth, this explains, this is what the HaKadosh Baruch Hu is mourning over these souls, these lost souls. Unfortunately, they have no share in the world to come. They have no chelik in Olam haba. They have nothing there. They're gone. They're cut off forever. Meaning, this is not something that's temporary. This is something that's permanent. And we started off saying that, the Torah is eternal, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu sees the past, present, and the future. So why is the HaKadosh Baruch Hu mourning over the destruction of the Jewish people? And the answer is because not everybody's going to make it. Not everybody's going to make it. Rabbeinu Yonah also brings down a whole list of same or very similar list to what the Rambam brings down. If you want to look it up, it's in Sha'ar Tshuva in the third Sha'ar. And these are people that lose a share in the world to come. You would think, okay, these are people that are not observant, they're not religious, they're not orthodox, they're not coming to Torah anytime, they're not listening to all these classes, these amazing Torah classes. These are people that are far off, but me, I'm good, I'm safe, I'm clear. But then Rabbeinu Yonah goes and lists Averos, lists sins that people also lose this share in the world to come. And it doesn't exclude the Jewish people, the religious people, the Orthodox people. On the list, it will be embarrassing someone in public, speaking Lashon Hara. These sins, unfortunately, are very, very common. There are another point from Rabbeinu Yonah that Rabbi Shimshon pincus brings down, that if someone says, okay, you have a Jewish person that takes care of public affairs, very big askan, helps a lot of the Jewish people, helps the community, or you have other people that are very big into kiruv, and they're going and they're making people people to do tshuva, they're contributing positively to the Jewish people, right? These are what, again, Orthodox people would think, okay, you're doing something good. But what about if you have someone that sits in the Beis Medrash, doesn't speak to anybody, and just sits learning day and night? Think, what are they contributing? What are you doing? Okay, fine, you're sitting and you're learning. It's great. You're earning yourself eternal reward. Okay, but what are you doing? You can't compare it to somebody who's going and is being an askin, is going and he's helping the community. You can't compare it to somebody who's maybe going and bringing people closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which again, both of them are very great things. But we can't negate the people that are sitting and learning Torah. The Gemara in SAY THAT tells us that people that are learning Torah are the most powerful protectors of the Jewish people. The most powerful, and this is so apropos in this day and this time and our day and age, when you have the whole situation in Israel where you have people that saying, okay, why isn't the yeshiva bachrim, why are the yeshiva boys, why are they not going and serving in the army? They're not protecting Israel. They're sitting and learning all day. If they only knew, they're protecting the Jewish nation a lot more than the soldiers are. Now, I'm saying that you may hear that, you may understand it, but how many people really believe in that? Right? You have, okay, fine. You know that, okay, fine. But if you think about it, if you could have the army, the IDF, another 500,000 reservists, that's a huge number of what we're coming to. That's going to make a big difference. And we start to think maybe, you know what? Maybe they should go in there. And you think even the Orthodox, even the people that are learned, maybe they would be. Again, it has to be in a kosher situation. And we can go and we can make the best circumstances. It will be a yeshiva half a day, and then they're in the IDF a half a day. And they're not with the woman, they're not with the secular. Everything is completely kosher. They're eating glatt kosher while they're shooting at terrorists. They're listening to Torah share on Torah anytime. You could think about all the right ways to say certain things and orchestrate in the right way, and you're still going to be 100% wrong. Because if you don't realize, if you don't understand that, what the greater protection is, the greater protection is for them to sit in the Beis Medrash. To sit and learn Torah, that's going to be a greater protection. Now for the secular, okay, fine, they can't comprehend that. They can't get to that, unfortunately. But what about the Orthodox? What about the people that are going to shul every single day, 3 times a day, that are keeping Shabbos, they're keeping kosher, they're doing all the laws, but when they come to this, they're I just don't see it. I just don't see it. Over here, this Rabbi Shimshon pincus says these are very dangerous category. This is somebody who denies the basic Torah truth. And it says Rabbi Shimshon pincus, these people also don't have a share in the Olam Haba. They don't have a share in the world to come. Again, the list goes on and on about the severity of the people that are in this category, people that are liars, people that are flatterers, hanafim, tzanim, scoffers. You have all these people, and you think about it, generally when you think about people that don't have share in the world to come, okay, it'll be the original list. Yeah, people that deny the Torah, thinking Christianity, that's okay, yeah, but I'm okay. But are you? Are you? We know that the mitzvos that were kept in 100 years, 1,000 years, 2,000 years ago, is not on the same level as the mitzvahs that were kept today. We understand that the prayers are not the same. The learning Torah is not the same. We could say that it's not on the same level. But we don't realize one of the greatest deterioration is the classification, the averos, the sins that causes somebody to lose their share in Olam Haba. You see, whenever someone gives a class and someone losing the share to Olam Haba, at least it has to, I'll say it about me. Whenever I give these classes, I focus on the big ones, right? There's cries, there's things that cause someone to get cut off. There's things that cause someone to lose their share in the world to come. But we forget, and that's what the biggest chiddush over here was. When it was like such a wake up call for me. When I was reading this, I'm we never focus on this stuff. So you read the Rambam, you read the Shari Tshuva, Rabbeinu Yena, and I've went through this Baruch Hashem so many times. And once you finish the big ones, you kind of okay, embarrass somebody in public, lashon hara. We know these things, but we never stop for a second. We never focus on that. Do you know how scary that is? That is people that can be fully religious, fully orthodox, and unfortunately still lose their share in the world to come. And unfortunately, it's very common nowadays that you have the embarrassment in public, the lashon hara, unfortunately, is very common. And, you could say we're very influenced by our surroundings. When you look at, for example, the presidential race, every time it comes, it's just such a shock to me. It's when I look at it, how does it work? The presidential debates, the presidential race, it's everybody is bashing the other person. Everybody is going and is embarrassing in public the other person, is bringing the other person down, and that's how they bring themselves up. And by the way, this starts off at the presidential level, which again, when you look at the American government, just America, that's the top. And then it goes to the businesses. You have the businesses do the same exact thing. You have one business bashes its competitor. Whenever you go, I'm a research guy, right? So if I want to buy a product, I do research. It's a blessing and a curse in the same thing, right? So I'm a research. So what I see constantly, how we are better than our competitors. Our competitors are not good at blah, 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 and we are blah, blah, blah. Meaning, so they have to bring the other competitor down, and that's how they raise themselves up. And this is what we see all around. So unfortunately, we get influenced by it. We see this is coming around, and unfortunately, this is how we start thinking that this is a normal, this is a normal aspect, and we don't realize how many of us, and this is something that we have to think about. Tisha B'av, Tisha B'av, HaKadosh Baruch Hu cries about all those lost souls, and we think, yeah, it's them. They're the ones, unfortunately, the people that are not religious, the people that are secular, the people that are reformed, conservative, they have no connection. Unfortunately, maybe on, we hope that they don't, but maybe they'll lose their share of the world. But us, no, people in my shul, no, come on, we're good. And we don't stop to think about it, wait a minute, Tisha B'av is about the mourning of the lost souls, and it's not only about them, we have to think about us, where we stand, and this is the eternal cry that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has, the eternal cry of these souls that do not have a share in the world to come. And when HaKadosh Baruch Hu, calls out, Nachamu Nachum Ami in Yeshayahu, chapter 40, verse 1, Nachamu Nachamu Ami, at the end of everything, console my people. We don't know, are we going to be included in that consolation? And this is a real day for crying. This is a day that we think about, what is our portion going to be? Are we going to be redeemed? Are we going to be saved? Are we going to be part of the third Beis HaMikdash? Or are we going to be thrown, unfortunately, lost away? How do we think? How do we go and understand all these things? Do we fall in these averas that cause somebody to lose a share in the world to come? And just to take an understanding on how scary this actually is, when you look at the Dar HaMidbar, the Dar HaMidbar was like the all-time spiritual height, right? It says in Yirmiyahu, chapter 2, verse 2, a pasuk that is actually very dear to me. It's a pasuk that was sung a lot for my Rosh Yeshiva, Rav Chaim Pinchas Scheinberg. It was very, very into this, this pasuk, and it was a song. Kayamar Hashem zacharti loch chesed ne'orayach. HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, I remember the loving kindness of your youth. Ahavas klulasayach. What was the loving kindness of it? Lech teich acharai b'midbar be'eretz lo zerua. That you were able to go into the desert that was not sown, and you were able to go just on faith. Meaning that the men, women, and children in the Dar Midbar, they were willing to go into the wilderness, to go into the desert. There was no cell phones. There was nothing. There was no provisions. They relied 100% on HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It was a complete reliance on Emunah and Bitachon in HaKadosh Baruch Hu. There was not even a promise that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was gonna support them and would help them. It was a level of spiritual greatness with a complete reliance and giving up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. However, the Mishnah in Sanhedrin tells us that the Dar HaMidbar has no portion in the world to come. They have no share in the world to come. This is one of the highest in the rate. They have no share in the world to come. What happened? Why do they not have a share in the world to come? And the answer is that they spoke Lashon Hara about Eretz Yisrael, about sticks and stones. The Gemara says they spoke Lashon Hara about Eretz Yisrael. Says the Gemara in Arachin, it says, if this is what happens when somebody speaks Lashon Hara about sticks and stones, about a land, what will be when someone actually speaks Lashon Hara about a live human being, a person, a fellow man? And this brings us a very, very big shock, a big realization. Where are we going to be? Where are we going to stand once the Nachamu Ami, Az Yimale Schak Pina, where are we going to be? Are we going to be part of that? And not only us, we have to look at the Jewish nation at large. Where are we all going to be? We look at historically, the Jewish people declined spiritually. We know once we had prophets, we had Rishonim, we had Achronim, we had Goinim, we had high levels. You look at nowadays and age, you have millions upon millions of Jews that don't even know how to say Shema. They don't know how to say Kriya Shema. You know, there are soldiers right now in Gaza that they're fighting that they don't know what to say Shema. They don't know how to say Shema. They don't know the words of Shema. Meaning when it comes, they could be an atheist, they could be whatever it is that they claim themselves to be. But there's no atheists in a foxhole. When bombs are flying, when bullets are whizzing past you, you want to scream out. You want to scream out. And they don't even know who and how and what to scream out. It's crazy. There's stories upon stories that come out. There was a soldier that didn't know how to say Shema, didn't know anything. A rabbi came, gave him a blessing. He's like, I don't know what you're saying. And the rabbi taught him to say Shema. It happened to be this person was like in a situation and he's like, he thought it was gone. Him and his whole crew. In order to say Shema, he quickly picked up his hand that the rabbi just taught him, and it happened to be as he kicked his hand, his gun like sort of jolted and hit a grenade that was coming towards him and bounced back. They were all, his whole crew was in the hospital. He was able to be saved. Like there are people that do not even know that this is like there are people that live in Israel. They speak Hebrew. They were born and raised in Israel, and they still don't know what Kriya Shema is. Says anybody who goes and feels connected to the Jewish people should be pained when they hear this. And this is something that you could cry about during Tisha B'Av. This is something that you're crying about. What's going to be with those neshamas? What's going to be with those souls that don't even have... I'm not talking about people that went against the Torah. The people that went... There are people that just don't know anything. Like, what's going to be with them? And if you care, and if you feel connected to the Jewish people, this should cause you to break out in tears. This is what it says Rabbi Shimshon pincus. This is Tisha B'Av's greatest test. The greatest test is how much we share in the pain of the Shekhinah, the pain of the Jewish people. So we know that eventually the Beis HaMikdash is going to be rebuilt. But what's going to be with these souls? I can't begin to tell you what... This was a huge chiddush for me. This was the first time that in my life that I ever learned about... it just blew my mind. I came across it kind of trying to figure out what I'm going to speak about, what's a good topic, how are we going to connect it? And this was just a massive bomb that it puts a whole different twist on what Tisha B'Av is really all about. When you see a child cry, you can, whatever. It could be, most likely nothing terrible happened. In fact, 99.9% of the time, nothing terrible happened. Oh, they felt they got a candy, they want whatever, small little things. You see an older gentleman cry, a 20-year-old cry, be like, okay, there's got to be a reason for that. If you see an older gentleman, 50s, 60s, businessman, successful, sitting on the floor, sitting and crying over here, then you know that there is a tragedy that's going on. The Chafetz Chaim would sit down, would break down in tears. He understood what he was mourning for. He understood, that we don't mourn for a sick person. We mourn over a dead person, a person that's not coming back. Again, we know people coming back in Tchias HaMesim, but there are people that are unfortunately not coming back. People that don't have a share in the world to come. And this is one of the things that we have to mourn for on Tisha B'Av, the spiritual state of the Jewish people. This is what we have to mourn for. Now, of course, not all is lost, especially for all those that are alive today in our day and age, in our generation. The Gemara in Sanhedrin, page 37a, tells us that even the traitors among the Jewish people, they have a good scent, a good smell. What does that mean, a good scent? That there was, the Medrash tells us a story that when the enemies came to the Beis HaMikdash, when it was destroyed, and they wanted to go and pillage it, and they wanted to go and take everything out. So they decided, they were a little bit nervous about it. They heard about the powers of the strength and the koiches of what was going on in Har Bayis. So they sent the Jew first, get the Jew to go first. So they found a Jew a man by the name of Yosef Meshisa, and he went in and he said, listen, you go in. We want to make sure that it's okay. You can come out alive. You go in. Whatever you find, you could take for yourself. So he went in. He went into the Heichal, and he brought out the menorah. And they said to him, he said, no. So that you cannot keep. He says, that's going to be for us. You want, go back in, and you can take something else out. So he said, he says, I just went in to the holiest place. I said, I'm not going back in. And they were like, oh yeah, you're going back in. And he was like, oh no, I am not going back in. And they kept on tempting, they kept on trying to persuade him and push him to go back in. He says, you're not getting this. He's like, okay, fine, take it. I'm not going back in. And they were pushing him to go back in. He refused to go back in until they ended up killing him. They ended up killing him because they ended up ripping his flesh with iron combs, like a very, very painful, torturous death. And he accepted upon himself his judgment. And Rabbi Shimshon commented and said that there's two ways that people do tshuva. One, they arouse themselves, from the side of good. They hear maybe a good shir, maybe they get motivated. A lot of people from the war, they changed the entire perspective. They came closer to Yiddishkeit. You have a lot of people that maybe they have, unfortunately, a death in the family that made them come closer to Judaism. You have some people that had a sickness and they got better and they got closer to Judaism, right? So they had different inspirations, sort of, that brought them good. But then you have people that says Rabbi Shimshon that they came close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu because they just sank so low. They were so low in evil, they just it's not rock bottom, because that's the wrong translation of it, but they went so far down, they were like, oh, wait a minute, I gotta change my life. This is bad. And that's when they started transitioning to become better people. And we see this nowadays very clearly. You have people that get inspired from talk a shir or whatever, and then you have people that did such a big avera and they just okay, I can't believe I just did that. I got to change my life. I got to change my perspective. I got to turn myself around. So when Yosef Meshisa saw this, he had fallen so much due to his desires, he realized what he was capable of doing, and he says, I angered my God. He says, I can't do that anymore. He refused to go back in there and anger HaKadosh Baruch Hu again, and he did tshuva in that low level. So this is 2 points, 2 aspects of returning to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, realizing how far we're fallen, and getting from the inspiration of, no, we have to make ourselves better. So the question that we have to ask is, how do we get to this? How do we get to this level of returning to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? It's not so nice to just give a shir and saying, oh, look how bad it is. People are going to be gone forever. They are not coming back, and this is what we're mourning for, and this is what we're going. But what are we going to do about it? What are we going to go, and how we're going to change the people that, let's say, are not on the level of making it, or chas v'shalom, if we are not on the level of making it, how are we going to change it? So I want to share with you something from Rabbi Yechiel Spiro. He has a sefer on the on the kinos, and on the 9th kina, which is based on teichacha, it's based on rebuke. And I want to share with you a few points that he brings down beautifully. So we know that there is two times that the Torah speaks about teichacha. The Torah speaks about the rebuke, and number one is in Parshas Bechukaisai, and number two is in Kisavai. So in Parshas Bechukaisai it tells about the destruction of the first Beis HaMikdash, the first temple, and in Parshas Kisavai speaks about the second Beis HaMikdash, the second temple. And it's very clear, it's very straightforward that if you keep the mitzvos, then God will bless you. If you do not, you will get punished. And this is the concept of rebuke is very, very central to the Churban of the Beis HaMikdash. The Gemara in Shabbos, in fact, tells us on page 119b that the reason why the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed was because they did not admonish one another. They did not rebuke one another. However, then you have also the Gemara in Yuma, page 9b, that says that the reason why the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed are very famously known as sinas chinam, baseless hatred. So we're giving 2 reasons. Number one, they didn't rebuke, they didn't admonish one another, and number 2 is because they had baseless hatred. But really, this is all one connected reason. And if you have a good friend, they will compliment you. You're the best. You are so good. Men are less good at this than women. Women are phenomenal at this. There could be a woman who is like the worst mother, and they'll be like, you're so special. You're going through so much. It's so amazing what so you beat your kids or you neglect your kid, but you're going through so much. They're just they know how to it's really a blessing. They're able to just bring it. Guys do not have to do it. So a good friend can compliment you, but a better friend A better friend is one that can critique you, that can say, you know what, you're lacking in this. You need to go and work on this, and that's really what a better friend is. The Mishnah in Perkei Avos tells us that in the first parak, in the sixth Mishnah, it says, "Asay lecha rav." You should make for yourself a rabbi, and buy yourself a friend. Why is it that buy yourself a friend is on a higher level, almost, than make yourself a rabbi? And the answer is because a friend can go and say, a true friend will tell you, hey, you're doing something wrong. Like, stop doing this. Like, this is not good. You're not doing well. That's a good friend. A good friend is not going to be like, you're amazing. Like steal and murder and do all the bad, but you're an amazing person. You're an independent, strong person. Like, that's not a good friend. A good friend would be like, no, you're doing something wrong. And the words hocheach tochiach es amisecha, that you have to go and give tochacha, give rebuke to your friend, immediately following that, it's leisisna es achicha belvavecha. Do not hate your friend in your heart, meaning that you want to know what the Maggid explains, that real rebuke, real techacha comes when you love someone so much, you say, hey, listen, you're doing something wrong. If you really love someone, you say, listen, you gotta work on what you're doing. You're not doing something right. It's going to be damaging for you. You have to go do it. So for a parent, it's much easier because there's such a clear love for a child. And a parent can say to the child, hey, by the way, I'm telling you you're doing something wrong because I love you, because I care about you, and I want you to do better. I want you to do better. It's my obligation as a parent that you have to go and you have to do better. And they're able to be very real and very true. You want to know why? Because at the end of the day, like a parent, and a child, as long as you're doing it in a healthy manner, the relationship is going to be there. But when you have a friendship, the friendship sometimes is like, okay, I'm nervous if I'm going to say this. Maybe they could drop me as a friend. But a real friendship, a true connection, you could tell that person, hey, you're doing something wrong. You could say it straight out. And if it's a true friendship, they will get that and be like, okay, wait a minute, like there's something wrong over here that maybe I should do. If I have someone that loves me so much and is telling me that I need to do better, there must be something to do with that. And that's why that criticism works. If the greater the love that you have for that person, the greater the criticism works, right? So if there's a husband and a wife that have a really, really high level of love and a connection for it, then and it's obvious, and both sides know it, when there's a criticism, it's accepted more, because they know that the other person just loves me so much. When there is a child and a parent, and the parent criticizes the child and says you have to do better, if there's real love over there, that the child knows, okay, my parent only wants the best of me. And that's the same thing with a friendship. If there's real love in it, and the parent or the friend or the child, whatever it is telling something, they can realize, wait a minute, this person cares so much about me, there must be something to it, and let me try to go, and maybe let me try to understand it. That's what it says, you have to purchase it. It's worth so much, it's even worth it, you have to go and pay for it. That's a good friend. And that's when the first Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, is like, you can say, wait a minute, I thought it's sinas chinam, baseless hatred. If there's no love, then there's baseless hatred. If there's baseless hatred, then you can't rebuke one another, you can't guide another person to go on the right path. Sometimes we're so stuck in our own mindset and our own path that we don't see the real over the bird's eye view and what's right and what's wrong. And we need someone else to come and say, hey, by the way, you're doing something wrong, you got to fix it. You got to fix what you're doing. So today I was speaking to one of my Rabbeim, Rabbi Applebaum, and I was speaking to him about what I was going to speak about. So he told me, he said he recently heard a share from Rabbi Simcha Banim Cohen, who was close to Rabbi Moshe Feinstein, and he said, like, in this year, Rabbi Moshe was asking Rabbi Simcha Banim Cohen, he says, how many friends do you have? So how many friends do you have? A busy person. How many friends? 10, 20 friends. And Rabbi Moshe Feinstein says, no. How many friends do you really have? 10, 20. Says, you want to know what a friend is? Says Rabbi Moshe Feinstein. A friend is that when someone is doing something wrong, and that's your friend, you can't sleep at night because the guy is doing something wrong or the girl is doing something wrong and it's bothering you so much. A true friend really cares about the other person, really cares and wants the other person to do what's right. That's what true friendship is all about. And I was asking my Rebbe, it's such a sensitive topic to speak about rebuking and speaking about criticizing. It's such a difficult topic. And and I was saying, is this something we should speak, how to bring about? And he said, this is something that's necessary. This is something that you need to speak. It depends how you speak about it. It's very funny because he said that, Sfaradim, you tell it to them straight out, they love it. They love it. Ashkenazim need a little bit, softer kuchi type of a way. But this is a necessary thing. But it all depends on how you come and how you present it. And this is the problem, unfortunately, what happened when the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. They didn't care about their friends. The friends were acting inappropriately. And eventually what happened was that the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed. There's a story with the Chafetz Chaim. The Chafetz Chaim once visited the town of Lida, which was near Radin, where he lived. And he knew and he heard that there was a spiritual decline in the city. So he announced that he wanted to speak in the city. And again, everybody came into the shul. Everybody came in, and spoke. And the Chafetz Chaim started speaking about the guf, the body, and the neshama, the soul. And he says, they're wonderful neighbors. They live alongside each other. They work great together. It could be 70 years, 80 years, 90 years. But what happens is when they come up to heaven, each one tries to blame the other. The body says, no, it's the soul's fault. And the soul says, no, it's the body's fault. And everybody's blaming others, meaning that you can see that you have neighbors. They were living alongside each other in harmony and peace for many years, and all of a sudden they don't get along anymore. Says the Chafetz Chaim. He says, my dear friends of Lida, he says, we've been good friends for many years, but when you go up to heaven and you're going to get judged, they're going to ask you, why didn't you behave properly? Why did you behave so inappropriately? And your response is going to be, well, listen, we had, Rabbi Yisrael Meir Kagan, the Chafetz Chaim, he lived right near us. He was a huge Talmid Chacham. He never said a thing. So we figured, we're okay. We're good. So the Chafetz Chaim says, I've come to tell you that you're not acting correctly. You're not acting the way that you should be acting. And Rav Shach said something also like this, also in the name of the Chafetz Chaim. He spoke to a group of Rabbanim, a group of rabbis. And he says, after 120, all your congregants of your synagogues are going to come and they're going to be interrogated in heaven. And they're going to be found guilty for sins that they've committed. And they're going to try to give excuses. And what if one of their excuses is going to be, but wait a minute, I had a rabbi and he knew what I was like. He knew what I was doing and he never said a word to me. So says Rav Shach, isn't that a good excuse? Isn't that a good excuse? So what are we going to say when we get up to heaven after 120? I know I was recently speaking to one of my older students from many years ago, and we were speaking about a bunch of different issues and things. And this is someone that was struggling with being religious for a long time. For some time they were, and then they weren't. It was an on and off type of a situation. And then they, I was talking, and speaking about Shabbos and kosher and different things. And all of a sudden, she goes and she says, Rabbi, I don't want to be religious. He says, I realize this life is not for me. He says, I'm not going to be religious. This is not going to be religious. I'll be spiritual. I'll meditate. I'll have gratitude to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Believes in God. Believes in the Torah. Believes in it. This is just not for her. And she went on to explain of what she was going to do. And she, was going through a little bit of a difficult time. So I stopped her. And I said, what you're doing is very, very wrong. You are not right. If you're going to go and you're going to just not be religious, you are not correct. Again, you're going to do what you want to do, I told her. I can't force you to do anything that you don't want. But I just want you to be very, very clear that you're wrong in your decision. You're wrong in it. You can't say, okay, wait, listen, I tried it. It's not for me. I'm going to come up to heaven and be like, God, well, I was spiritual. Well, God, I connected to you. Well, God, I even talked to you. I prayed to you. I did that, but I didn't keep Shabbos because it's not for me. I'm like, you could, in your mind, the way that you're explaining it to me, it's very accurate. You're very correct. You're very right. And this is the life that you've chosen. But I, as your rabbi, I have an obligation. And I was trying to explain to her, it's a very, very sensitive conversation. We're going through a very difficult time. And I was explaining to her, I'm like, whether or not you're going to listen to me, I have an obligation to tell you, after 120, you're going to come and you're going to say, wait a minute, how come you never told me about this? So I laid it out very straightforward. I'd be like, you're very wrong, like 100% wrong in what you're doing. Whatever you decide to do is on you, and you're going to decide. But I have to tell you that all your cheshbonos, all your calculations, is 1,000% wrong. Because we have an obligation. If someone's calling and someone's speaking to you, can be like, oh yeah, I totally understand. Yeah, I get it. It's very difficult. Totally. As long as you just do part of it or some of it. Which again, for some people, that may be the correct response. And I say kind of because it has to come with the real truth. Because after 120, you're going to have to answer. They're going to have to answer. Everybody's going to have to answer for something. And we have to, at least you cover yourself and be like, listen, what you're doing is wrong. What you're doing is 100% wrong. Reform, conservative, reconstructionist, 1,000% wrong what they're doing. And every time I speak to somebody in that side, again, it's been dwindling since, because of the way I speak. I tell them, you're doing something wrong. It's wrong of what you're doing. Again, you have to say it nicely. You have to say it correctly. You have to say it lovingly. But the point has to be put across. Because if you have a rabbi that's coming and is speaking to a congregation and speaking about that and never tells you that you're doing something wrong, then you have, you could have a sort of excuse. Again, we don't have an excuse after 120. Only HaKadosh Baruch Hu knows everything. God knows everything. But we have to make sure that we give everybody the maximum opportunity to reach the highest potential possible. And sometimes it's difficult, and sometimes you have to be blunt, and sometimes you have to be an uncomfortable conversation. Rabbi Yerucham Levovitz, the Mashgiach of the Meir Yeshiva, brought this story to emphasize where there was a merchant, a liquor merchant, that there was a liquor tax in this particular country, a very high liquor tax, and they people that were dealing in alcohol usually didn't make a lot of money because of this liquor tax. So this liquor merchant decided that he is going to, avoid this liquor tax or decide not to pay this tax. And he became very wealthy because of it. And eventually they caught him and they sentenced him to death because it was a very, very serious, it was a very, dictatorship type of government. And they decided if you don't listen, you are going to get punished to the full extent of the law, which is whatever I decide, and that is death. And as they put him up in chains and they were going to bring him to the to the gallows, and he says, "Do me a favor, pass me by my rabbi's house." And they were like, "Okay, last will and testament, fine." They passed him by the rabbi's house. The rabbi came out and saw him. And this person looked at the rabbi and says, "By the way," he says, "you knew that I was doing this." He says, why didn't you tell me anything?" Now, the rabbi could say, "You didn't know? You didn't know that you're not allowed to steal from the taxes? You didn't know that you can't do it?" But again, just because people know something doesn't mean that they don't need to hear it again. And they don't need to hear it from a loving place. Again, if you're coming for it from a negative place, then rebuke is not going to be accepted that way. Better not to give it in that way. But if it's coming from a loving place, even though the person knows what they're talking, what the rebuke is, even though they sometimes, we need to hear it. We need to hear it from all different angles, as long as it's coming from a loving place. And this, Rabbi Yerucham would explain, and this is the name of the Chafetz Chaim. He says that the wicked people, when they'll be led to Gehenna for all the sins that they've done, they're going to pass by the rabbis who didn't give them musar, who didn't tell them what they needed to do. So this, as we approach Tisha B'Av, this is something we have to be very, I don't know what the right word is, understanding, hearing, realizing the situation where we have to help Klal Yisrael. We have to make sure that everybody, including us, don't fall into this category of lost souls, and make sure sometimes we need to rebuke ourselves. Sometimes we have to go and correct ourselves and say, wait a minute, we know ourselves better than anybody else. Maybe our spouses know us a little bit better, but for the most part, for the general population, we know ourselves better than everybody else. There's a time to be real with yourself. And there's a time that we have to be real with our friends, with our families, with our neighbors, with our congregants, with our chavusas, with our friends, everybody around us. However, it is very important that we put a disclaimer that you have to be very, very, very careful in how you're going to rebuke people. The prophet Zechariah Hanavi, was brutally murdered by his fellow Jews. Why? Why was he punished in such a manner? Not why the Jews did it. Why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu allow it? The Rizal says that because he chastised Klal Yisrael publicly, he went and he gave rebuke to Klal Yisrael in public. And this is not how Musar is given. This is not how Musar should be given, and that because of that he was punished. Again, as a general Musar shir, you could give it in public, but particulars and things like that should be very, you shouldn't embarrass anybody in public. You should give everybody, in a one-on-one attention, and because of that he was punished. And Rabbi Shimshon actually brings down one of the greatest ways of saying Musar that he heard from his Rav, that he was, as a young boy, he was a ball player, and he took it very seriously, very, very seriously, and he used to lose himself, he would yell at the other kids and blame the other kids because of their loss, because they missed the shot, or whatever it is. And one day his rabbi came over to him, and he said, you have a diamond, let's say, and the diamond is a perfect diamond. It's worth a tremendous amount of money, tens of thousands of dollars. But if that diamond has a little flaw in it, all of a sudden it doesn't go down by just a little bit because of that little flaw. It goes down. It could be worth tens of thousands of dollars to be worth a few $100s because of that flaw. And the rabbi goes over to his student, and he says, you have so many great character traits. You're like a diamond. You're so amazing. You're so perfect. You're so clear. But you have a flaw with this anger, with this issue that you're dealing with the ball. He says, not anger. He didn't say anger. This issue when you're playing ball. He says, if a diamond so special like you has a major flaw, it plummets in value. It's not worth. He says it's not befitting for you. He says you have such a high level, you have such a value, you're so great, you're so amazing in so many different things. He says, but you have one flaw. He says it's going to ruin your whole valuation of who you are. He says, work in it, be careful in it. And he goes on and he says that the Musar worked so well. He says, and this is the way that you're supposed to give Musar. You have to mine the diamond first. You have to raise the value of the diamond first. You have to show the person how amazing they are. And only then, after you polish it and after you mine it, you'd be like, okay, by the way, you have this issue. It's not, you're amazing. You're so good. You have this one issue you need to work on. Imagine, you think of yourselves, most people think of themselves as great people. And we all know we all have issues, right? Maybe we have an anger issue, maybe we have a short fuse issue, maybe we have a bunch of different issues that we need to focus on, and little character flaws. And we'll be like, okay, in general, we're great people, we're good people. We have maybe one or two flaws we need to work on it, but that pushes it on the back burner. But when you think about yourself, you're a diamond. And you have a flaw. You have an anger flaw. You have an issue flaw. This is the major flaw in the diamond. You're worth a few $100,000. Now, because of your anger issue, because of your short fuse, all of a sudden you're worth a few $100s. Why are you going to do that to yourself? You're such an amazing person. You're so great. And this way of saying Musar is this is not something new, right? This is something we all know, right? You have to bring closer with your right, you have to push with your left. This is something, but the way to explain it, it's something that also such a major chiddush that the way that you go and you explain it to somebody, whether you're speaking to a student, whether you're speaking to a spouse, whether you're speaking to your child, whatever it is, or whether you're speaking to yourself. You think about it, right? We all think we're great people. We all think we're amazing people. Be if we're so amazing that we have this tiny flaw that's reducing our valuation by so much. Isn't it a shame that we don't take care of it and we raise our valuation to what we're really worth? And another aspect that's very important is that when you hear Musar, we have to, the first reaction is defensive. The first reaction is, you're telling me I am amazing. How dare this person speak to me about it? No, the first thing, we have to embrace it. We have to embrace it. We have to improve. We all know we have to improve. We all know we have things that we have to work on. And in fact, Rabbi Shimshon says that a person's entire growth during his lifetime or her lifetime depends on their acceptance of criticism, the acceptance of the tochacha, the acceptance of the rebuke. That is the most important thing of what a person's growth is going to be. Because if we can't accept our tochacha, if we can't accept rebuke, if we can't accept criticism, then guess what? We're not going to change. And it could be for a variety of reasons. Some people can't accept it because they have low self-esteem. Some people can't accept it because they have too high of a self-esteem, right? It's funny how the thing works in two opposite, extremes. And some people can't accept it because they have an anger issue and they don't, how dare someone speak to me about that? We have so many ways and so many reasons of our character traits, of our emotions that would prevent us from changing. But if we remove that, and we embrace it for what it is, right? Because at the end of the day, we all want to get better. There's not a person alive that doesn't want to improve themselves. Everybody wants to be better. No one wants to be let me become more of a badder person, disgusting person, a worse person. Everybody wants to become better. And we have our opportunities. We have our many opportunities. Opportunities that come from within and opportunities that come from outside. And we have to capitalize on those opportunities. And it's not easy. It's difficult. It's a difficult thing, but we have to capitalize it. When Yisro, Moshe's father-in-law, saw that Klal Yisrael was standing and waiting to be judged, and he was, admonishing them. He was admonishing Moshe Rabbeinu. He says, "Why are you sitting by yourself? And the entire nation is standing and is mourning from the morning to standing from morning until evening. They're standing there." Rashi says that Moshe Rabbeinu was sitting like a king, and Yisro was disturbed. What about the honor of the Jewish people? And he knew that Moshe Rabbeinu would accept his criticism, would accept his rebuke, would accept his tochacha. And that's the way that Torah is received. It can only be received by somebody who can acknowledge that they're making mistakes. That is something that we need to internalize. The Imrei Emes, when he was a young child, his grandfather, the Sfas Emes, saw him and saw that he came to shul late. And he started, giving him tochacha, rebuke, scolding him for waking up late, not waking up on time. The truth of the matter is, he woke up on time. He was in shul on time, but the grandfather just simply didn't notice him. And he sat there quiet. Imrei Emes sat there quiet. As a young child, he sat there quiet and he accepted all the rebuke. His friend, after he saw this, a friend went over to him and says, "Why did you tell your grandfather you were on time? You were in shul the whole time. Like your grandfather only saw you very late, but you were really here the whole time." So the Imrei Emes said, "What?" He said, "I miss out on your chance to get real teichacha, to get real rebuke, real criticism from my grandfather? My Rebbe? Are you kidding me? I'm never going to give that up." You know how the Imrei Emes saw it? The Imrei Emes saw that his grandfather going and giving him rebuke, that's the best thing in the world. He says, "I'm not going to correct it, even if he's wrong and I was right. Who cares? Here's an opportunity." And the reason that he was able to do that is because he was able to accept the musar. I want to bring down one final point, one final story, and then we'll end off. We'll open up to any questions. That, many times we speak to other people, we, learn something, and we feel it doesn't affect us. It doesn't really. We don't know the power of the Torah. We don't know the power of rebuke. We don't know the power of the through criticism through love and the correct way of doing something. So I want to share with you a beautiful story. Rabbi Tzvi Nakar brings down, there was a girl from Eretz Yisrael, from a very wealthy upper class family, secular, that unfortunately what happens is in the secular world in Eretz Yisrael, they tend to be very, very against spirituality. So there's a void of, like when somebody needs to connect to spirituality, people need to connect to the spiritual. As secular and as far as we have fallen, people need to connect. So they connect to the universe, they connect to meditation, and people do different things that they connect to the higher spiritual realms. But in Israel, unfortunately, if they're devoid of the Torah and the spirituality, many of them tend to go to India, to the Far East, to Tibet, to go and search for spirituality. So this particular girl, she went to search for spirituality in the Far East. And she ended up finding this cult in India that was completely involved in avodah zarah and idolatry, and she got so sucked into it. She got completely like enveloped in it. She cut herself off from her friends, from her family in Eretz Yisrael. Like everybody was cut off, and it would be for months and months on end that she wouldn't even speak to her parents. And her parents were like worried sick. It's a daughter, it's a child. What's with her? Is she alive? Is she okay? What's she doing? Again, they were secular, so they didn't it bothered them to a certain extent, but they never even heard from her. So as time went by, the brother of this girl, he became religious, ended up marrying a religious girl and started a religious life. And it always bothered him how he saw his parents were like suffering. They didn't know what was going on with their little girl that's in the Far East, India, doing who knows what and who knows where. And is she alive? Is she not alive? Like they knew nothing, and it was eating them up inside. So he decided he couldn't take it anymore. He goes and he books a flight to India, and he's going to search for her. He flies to India. He starts traveling from place to place from where he thought that that she was the last that he heard. And finally, after a long search, he finds her. And instead of a very welcoming embrace, "Oh, my brother from so long ago, I'm so happy that he came," she was very cold to him. She's like, "What are you doing here?" And he started explaining to her, he says, our parents are worried. He says, I have nothing to do with that life anymore. He says, I'm happy over here. And she starts explaining to him, he says, I don't know why you flew out of here. You're wasting your time. You're wasting your effort. You're wasting your money. You're wasting your energy. He says, I found here my purpose. I found meaning to my life over here. I found that I'm connected with this guru. I'm connected to this. She didn't call it a cult. She's like, I'm connected to this cult. I'm so connected. I found reality. I have nothing to do with my previous life. Leave me alone. You wasted time. Go home. And her older brother goes over to her and he says, listen. He says, I understand that you're satisfied. You're happy of where you are. He says, but our parents, our mother, our father, they're worried sick about you. You don't call. You don't speak to them. They don't know you're alive. You're dead. You're suffering. You're in that. You're happy. You're not happy. They don't know anything what's going on with you. You don't call. You don't come to visit. There's nothing. And it's eating them up inside. Keep it of aim. Come in. Visit. Speak to them. And she's like, you don't understand. He says, I'm completely cut off from the outside world. He says, in order for me to achieve the meaning and the happiness of life, I have to be completely enveloped in what I'm doing with. I'm completely cut off. So the brother goes over there and says, listen. He says, at least go over, fly into Israel, meet our parents, meet our mother, meet our father. Explain to them the situation. Tell them you're okay. You owe them that. You know how much money they invested in you? How much effort they gave birth to you? They raised you. They did so much for you. The least you could do is give them a little bit of understanding of what you're going for. Go visit them and then come back over here. So, it struck a nerve. And she's like, you know what? You're right. They did do a lot to me. And they did even pay for this trip. You're right. And she decides that she's going to come back with him. She didn't have any money. She was living in, the land and who knows what in this Indian, town, Indian village in the mountains. And he says, I'm going to buy you a ticket. And they fly back together in Israel, and they reunite with with the mother, with the father, and she starts explaining to him the situation, and she's tying loose ends, and she needs to get some documents anyways. And, the days go on in her trip. She's doing everything that she needs to, but the brother is trying to figure out how am I going to go and how am I going to save her. It's so bad. And he was explaining this to his parents. He says, you know what she told me? She told me that she completely was infatuated with this guru, completely infatuated with this cult to the point that she plans on marrying this guru. She didn't, don't mention that to her, whatever it is. But this is so he's destroyed inside. How am I going to get her? How am I going to get her to stay and not go back? So he thinks about a plan. He goes over in his shul that he davened. His rabbi was a very persuasive rabbi, a great speaker, and every day between Mincha and Ma'ariv he gave a little speech. So he went and he consulted with his rabbi. He says, maybe we can orchestrate something, maybe we'll plan something, somehow I'll get her to come to shul. Between Mincha and Ma'ariv, you'll make this amazing speech about conversion and about going away from Judaism and intermarriage and all those things, and hopefully that will inspire her to go and call off the potential wedding and the conversion with this cult and all that. So the rabbi said, let's schedule a date. They schedule a date. In a few days, the rabbi is going to go prepare, and he was going to orchestrate it. A few days go by, and he goes and he brings his sister. He says, "Let's go and let's you're going back in a few days to India. Let's talk in a little cafe." And he happened to put that the cafe was near the shul, and they're talking, and everything's going well. And he's like, "Oh wow, look at the time. It's so late. I didn't pray yet. Do you mind? I want to continue this conversation. Now you're going back. Can you do me a favor? Just hang out in the shul in the ladies section while I pray, and then afterwards we'll continue it." And this sister didn't know any better. It says, okay, fine, all right, yeah, not a problem. She goes and she hangs out in the women's section, and this person's he's the brother's the plan is working as planned, and he goes into the shul and he starts davening mincha, and then he looks up and he's like, where's the rabbi? The rabbi is not there. And he's like, this is my only chance. Where is he? He's okay, maybe he's going to come after mincha. And he finishes davening mincha, and the rabbi is not there. So this is the speech. This is the speech that was going to be indirectly going to save her. The rabbi was nowhere to be found. And instead, another congregant walked up and said, listen, the rabbi always gives a speech, so let me give a speech. He takes out a kitzur Shulchan Aruch. This guy was not a speaker. He was not persuasive. He gave the most boring, the most plain speech ever. that he just opened up and he learned laws of Hashavas Aveda, laws of returning a lost object. He didn't even try to make it interesting. He just literally just went and just read it through, and he said, if you lose something, you have to go and you have to return it to the rightful owner. And then after this really, really boring is not a good word to say in a Torah speech, right? But it was a really plain, monotone, shir. And then he finishes off with a sentence. And he says, at times, God works out that a person loses something in order to give someone else the merit of the great mitzvah of Hashavas Aveda, of returning a lost object. And the shir ended. The brother was deeply disappointed. Marav ended. He, spoke to his sister afterwards. He obviously didn't mention anything. But he felt like it was what a waste. Like he orchestrated this whole scheme and it all went fraught. So he goes back to the house, the few days go by. The sister goes and tells, the parents, while they tried to convince her to stay in Eretz Yisrael, find a nice secular guy to go and marry. She's like, listen, this is a done deal. I'm going back to India. This is the place where I belong. And you can either accept it or not, but this is where I'm going. So she sets out for the Far East. She sets out for India, plans of never returning. A while goes by, and she started preparing, she was in India. She was part of the, this cult, and she was very close to the guru, and eventually he proposed, and they set a wedding date, and it was about 2 weeks before the wedding date. And the girl was walking with this guru, walking in the town, and as she's walking in the town, they notice there's a fat wallet sitting right in front of them. And the guru looks at it, picks it up, opens it up, sees there's a few $1,000s in there. There's credit cards, there's a passport in there, there's a license in there. And he is looking at it and he's smiling. He's like, the gods are smiling at us. Heaven is smiling at us, giving us this present, this gift. And she looks at him and she says, you're not going to return it? And he says, return it. He says, why would I return it? And she's like, because it belongs to somebody else. And it, all the information is right there. This is not only someone's money, it's their documents, it's their passport, it's their license, it's their credit card. And he responds to her and he says, this is a gift from heaven. He says, I'm going to throw it away? What, are you kidding me? He says, this is a gift from heaven. And, they're going back, back and forth. And, she says, I have to step aside. And she calls for the first time in many months back to Israel. And, she calls and she says, listen, I have to, things are not really working out. She was really shooken to the core. And she says, I want to come home, but I know I didn't leave on the best of terms. And the mother said, she was talking to her mother. She says, of course. She said, come back immediately. And she went and she booked a flight. When the family heard that she's coming back home, they didn't know she's married, she's not married. They were going to throw a celebration, a surprise party. They called the friends and family. They ordered caterers. They picked her up from the airport. She was in a very emotional state. She was about to get married, and the whole thing was shaken. And she gets to her house. There's a whole huge surprise party, catered, very fancy. All the friends and family over there, and she was completely emotional. She started crying. She started, obviously she was welcoming everybody. And then, surprisingly, she asked to speak. And she gets up over there and she starts telling her family. She says, I was about to get married. In fact, in about 2 weeks' time, I was going to get married and walk down the aisle with this guru that I met. And my life was going to be solidified and going to stay there for, forever. And she starts telling the story where she was walking in the street with a guru, and there was a wallet that they came across, and she started asking the guru, says, what, let's return it. And the guru was like, what, are you kidding me? I'm not going to return it. And then she goes on and she says, when I was here last time, I happened to be in a shul in the synagogue, and the rabbi, or what she thought was rabbi, was a regular person, he says, was giving a class about returning lost object. And we were arguing. I was arguing with my fiance. We were going to get married, and I was arguing with him. I was like, return it. And he was like, no, I'm not going to return it. And I'm like, you're supposed to return it. And he says, everything that I taught you was all about yourself. You have to go and achieve happiness. You have to go and achieve content. And if the God sends you something, you have to go and you have to accept it. And like here, the God sent us, this money a wallet full of money, and who knows what other treasures, lie in it. And I looked at him and I said, and I remembered that shir and I remember that lecture, and I told him, I said, maybe to achieve the light, to achieve this happiness, to achieve this, we have to do for somebody else. And maybe God gave us this opportunity to help somebody else. And then she said, then this took the fight to the next level. And he said, what do you mean to help somebody else? He says, the whole purpose is that we focus on ourselves and bring ourselves to serenity, bring ourselves to happiness, what does it have to do with somebody else? And she was saying, well, no, you have to worry about other people. We have to worry about the people at large. We have to be good people. And we're arguing back and forth, and all of a sudden I came to a realization. It says, how am I going to spend my life with this person? This person only thinks about himself. This person only cares about himself. It says, it was the biggest wake-up call in my life. And I said, right then and there, I broke it off and I decided that I'm coming back. And she's saying this with tears in her eyes. And she looks at her brother and she says, you don't know. She says, that one class that I happened to hear when I was sitting over there, that saved my life. And in his mind, he's like, you have no idea. He says, you have no idea. In his mind, obviously he didn't tell her that he had a whole thing planned of having somebody else go and having somebody else speak to her, and a rabbi that's persuasive was able to do it. Meanwhile, it was the driest class possible that spoke about losing an object. And this ended up derailing her entire plan of leaving Judaism and going into a cult and going and marrying a non-Jew and just throwing everything off, because it brought her to a realization of what MS is, what the truth is really all about caring about other people, about helping other people. And we learn from this such an amazing lesson. The few lessons. Number one is, you look at it, sometimes we're sitting in a class and we'll be like, oh my gosh, this is so boring. Like, I can't, this is and you think nothing will ever come out of it. And you never know what will come out of it. Like, we plan and we orchestrate and we do all these different things that then we're going to, come to some sort of amazing conclusion. We have no idea. Every single thing that you learn, you have no idea how it will come down, down the line. And the second thing that we learn is that you have somebody that's so far off. They were lost. They have no share in the world to come. Everything was gone. And they still had the ability to come back. They gave up everything and they still have the ability to come back. And we have to look at this, and this is coming to Tisha B'Av this year. And Hashem, the Mashiach should come and we shouldn't need to fast. We should be really celebrating. But if Mashiach does not come yet, and we're still fasting, and we're still mourning over the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash, we cannot forget this amazing chiddush from Rabbi Shimshon pincus, that we have to mourn over the lost souls. But we don't really mourn over them and say, okay, it's a given up, it's a lost cause. There's something that we can still do. There's no situation that's gone forever. There's something that we can do, and you never know. What you're going to say. I can't tell you how many times I spoke to people that I thought it was a lost cause, and they somehow came back. Like, I've been so wrong on this so many times. Like, it came to the point that I was like, okay, I can't judge this person to okay, is this person coming back or is this person not coming back? Because you really have no idea. And by the way, unfortunately, it works vice versa. When you think a person's on the way back, and then they unfortunately, they throw it all away. But coming this Tisha B'Av, we have to mourn for the lost souls. And we have to not only mourn for the lost souls, but say, what are we going to do? So now what are we going to do? How are we going to go and how are we going to fix it? Are we going to daven for them? Are we going to start bringing them maybe to a rabbi or class? Maybe something that we're able to do. But besides that, we also have to look at ourselves and be like, are we in that category of lost souls? Are we in that category? We don't know where we stand. Lashon hara, embarrassing someone in public. These are things that also causes someone to lose a share of the world to come. So this really is a cause of crying. This is really a cause of tshuva, coming this Tisha B'Av, to realizing where we're holding and where we actually need to be. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu help us that we wake ourselves up, bring ourselves to the right path, help other people come to the right path. Because again, the destruction of the Beis HaMikdash was because of sinas chinam, because we didn't love everybody. But if we love everybody, we can give them rebuke out of love, techacha out of love, criticism out of love, and bring them closer. And that's why the Beis HaMikdash was destroyed for the two reasons that we mentioned, was because they didn't give rebuke to somebody else, and they had sinas chinam, because really they're two of the same. That if you love somebody, you want them only to have good, you want them only to be on the right path. So we have to focus. If it's not bothering us that somebody's, let's say, doing a sin, that means that we're lacking in Ahavas Chinam. We're lacking in Ahavas Yisrael, and we have to focus on it because we're still dwelling in that sin as Chinam. So these are the things that we need to work on. So again, what we should be working on is, number one, we should be crying and mourning for the lost souls. We should be crying and mourning to make sure that we are not part of those lost souls. We have to go and additionally, the third thing, we have to go and help people come closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And if we don't have the need and the push and the drive to make people come closer, then we have to mourn because we're in the category of sinas chinam. Why don't you love your fellow, to your friend, your brother, your sister, to bring them closer? If it doesn't bother you, then you're lacking in something. And this really is a reason to cry, and this really is a reason to mourn. But again, may HaKadosh Baruch Hu help us that we shouldn't need to mourn, and we should have the galus come to an end, and Mashiach should come. There should be an end of the war, and we should see the geula b'mehira b'yameinu. We will say just a kapitel tehillim before we open up to any questions, and then we'll open up to any questions. We'll say, as usual, kapitel kuf lamed, a kapitel tehillim for Eretz Yisrael, for all the soldiers, for all the impending attack from Iran. Who knows what it could be? It's only from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Everything's from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. What's going to be destroyed? What's not going to be destroyed? What's going to be saved? What's not going to be saved? It's only for HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And our obligation is to daven for Klal Yisrael. Kapitel Kuf Lamed, chapter 130. Shir Hamalais. Mima amakim karasicha Adonai shema bekaili tienas necha kashuv v'isa kol tachanunai im avaynais tish Maria Adonai mi yamoid ki im chas licha leman tivarei ki visi Adonai kif so nafshi v'lidvaraya echalti nafshi la'Adonai mishamim la'baiker shaymim la'baiker yachel Yisrael la'Adonai ki im Adonai achesed ve'arbei moifedus v'hu yiftais Yisrael mikol avanesav Achenu kol beis Yisrael hanetzunim batzara v'ashivya ha'oimdim bein bayam uvein bayabasha ha'makim yirachim aleim v'yotzim mitzara l'revacha ma'afela le'ara mishibad le'geula hashta ba'gala v'zman kariv v'neimar amen. And by the way, this is a litmus test that you could see how much you love your fellow Jew. That if you come and you hear about it, about like the situation at Israel, and the first thing is like, let me say kapitel tehillim, and you just said a kapitel tehillim, what we just said, then you're at least in a decent situation. But if I just said that kapitel tehillim, and you just like listened to it, didn't even participate in it, just know that you're lacking in something. Like why didn't you just do that? Like why didn't you just say a kapitel tehillim? Like why didn't you just say that tehillim for Klal Yisrael? And that is something that maybe you're lacking in avas Yisrael, maybe not. I'm just trying to think that, to make sure that I'm not giving this rebuke in public to the people, but it's something that we should consider. We consider. Like why is it not bothering us more? Let us say a kapitel tehillim. Let us daven for our brothers and sisters in Eretz Yisrael that they should all come back home safely, the soldiers, and that no harm should come to any of the Jewish people, not only in Eretz Yisrael, but really around the world. Okay, let us open up to any questions. Looks like we have just two. If a person is working on improving an aspect that cuts off a person from the world to come, can that person still be a part in the world to come? So it depends. It's an excellent question. So if the person is actively working on it, and they maybe didn't fully get to that yet, so there is reasons to say that person is still be saved. It could be they'll come back as a reincarnation to finish working in it. It could be they'll come. There's many different variations of it, but if you're at least starting to work in it, there is good place. There's a good foundation to say yes, that person can still come back. Okay, next question. Is it fair that a person loses the world to come if they were just on a lower level, and it's not fair to have such a high and unrealistic expectation? So I believe that the category of here of what the question is really on a tinik shenishba, or like a branching off on that, which is a great question, meaning that if somebody's on a lower level and they don't know, or maybe they kind of is it really an unrealistic expectation? So many things are realistic, and we consider them unrealistic. For example, let's say you have a secular person, and they're going very, very slow, and they're not really, they're moving they're at their own pace, and they really could do a lot more, and say, it's unrealistic. Most of the time, what makes something unrealistic is our own perception of the matter. That's what makes it unrealistic. It works for everything, by the way. It works for dieting. It works for college and tests. Somebody who thinks, somebody who's in high school, and they're studying for a test, and they'd be like, like it's unrealistic that I'll get a good mark. But you know what? At the end of the day, if they really put themselves to it, they can do it. 9 out of 10 people can really get to that. So most unrealistic expectations really is realistic. We just make it unrealistic in our own mindset and our own perception. But again, there is a category of tinik shenishpa where the person doesn't know, and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and only HaKadosh Baruch Hu takes that into consideration. Thank you for the kind words. Okay, another question. If I have a friend that is going to a yoga retreat this Shabbos, what could I tell her to make her understand that she shouldn't go, and especially during this very auspicious time? So that's a great point. So I'm assuming if they're going to a yoga retreat, the question is, first of all, do they keep Shabbos? And because chances are you cannot really go to a yoga retreat and keep Shabbos. So what I would recommend in this particular situation would just, again, I know this is a private message, but you can message me. I know who you are, so you can message me, in person. We could go and speak more in depth. But the general thing you could say is about, listen, if you need to go, whatever reason, at least not during this time. Like we're mourning for the temple, like push it off. Get our tali. Sometimes it's hard to tell somebody, don't do this, it's wrong. But sometimes it's easier to say, don't do this right now, push it off, do it a little bit later, and then, try to, convince it that. But again, there's a lot of different factors that come into it. Is she a Shomer Shabbos? Is she someone that keeps Shabbos? Is this a place that doesn't, doesn't seem like she'll be able to keep Shabbos? Like, there's a lot of different questions that I would have to, to follow up with that. But it has to come from a place of where it's coming from out of love. And I remember I was speaking to somebody once on Shabbos that they were very, very drunk, and they kept on, we're not religious, and they kept on trying to smoke, and I kept on trying to prevent them from smoking, and eventually, he's like, I need to smoke. And I just told him straight out, I said, look, it's really going to hurt me, really, it really hurts me to see you smoke and be Mechal Shabbos, because he was religious at one point. Can you just not do it in front of me? Please, I'm asking you, or at least not, not today. And the second that you're a little bit vulnerable, nobody's gonna be like, no, I'm gonna do it. No, any normal person. And I'm saying this person was drunk and he still was able to be like, okay, fine. I still remember it was on Avenue P and East 17. It's where this happened in Brooklyn. And I remember this is a story very vividly. And he's talking about maybe 5-6 years ago. And so sometimes when you're vulnerable, you're able to go and you're able to get a lot more from the person than if you're just going to, say, oh, don't do this. Okay. All right. How do we deal with people who do all the right things, daven, kosher, but so disrespectful for others? Are they considered heretics? So it depends on and how they are, what's a disrespectful, if they're embarrassing. Unfortunately, people that are acting religious but they're not connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's more of an outside thing. Meaning, so you have people that are religious, but they're outside religious, meaning they were born religious, and they're going to do all the things, right? They'll daven, they'll do kosher, they'll do everything that they need to do, but it's not internal. It's not inside, meaning when they daven, they don't connect. When they're learning, they're doing things because they have to check it. They have to check it off. So the way to get it is really it's not just about disrespectful. It's really getting that root of the problem, which is do you connect to God? Do you connect to Judaism? If you do that, then you're always on a path of growth. And if you're always on a path of growth, you won't be disrespectful to others. So the question really is how do we get them to connect to Judaism? That's really the question. And it's a great question, a difficult question, because it all depends on the person. But really, it's try to get that person to connect. And sometimes it's having a conversation with them and, bringing it just to the realization. It'd be sometimes we do things, right? We do all the Jewish stuff. We do the religious stuff. We do the Orthodox stuff. But we do it so out of habit that we never stop to think and we never stop to connect. So that's really a focus of what I would say to do to try to get that person to connect. How, when, and where will be depending on that person and what that person's background is. Okay, what if the person is Orthodox but it's a lot to not do it, speak Lashon Hara? Why is it okay to have those experiences? Okay, I'm not following the question. What if the person is Orthodox but it's a lot to not do, like speaking Lashon Hara? Meaning that I'm assuming the question is if it's very difficult. Why is it okay to have those experiences? First of all, it's not okay. Some people will be like, I'll do everything, but lashon hara is not I'm not going to do that. So no, a person should not say that. In fact, Rabbi Yaakov Rachimi was mentioned to me. It's actually been a little bit of a while that he has a whole thing about lashon hara, about learning hilchos lashon hara. So I would definitely recommend for everybody to go and to to learn those. Okay, so there's a clarification on this question regarding expectations. Everybody has expectations to do good, right? So the expectations is not only about it's beyond my ability. Everybody has the ability to do so much. We just cut ourselves short. It's the same answer. We cut ourselves short. We don't think that we have the ability to do it. We have the ability to grow so much. It's crazy on how much we have the ability, what we have the ability to do, and we don't accomplish it only because we set our expectations, our abilities very, very short. And that's the most powerful thing to realize, that you have the ability to do everything and anything. As long as you put your mind to it, as long as you decide you want to do it, you could have it done. You could complete it. Okay. This class will be posted online. As of now, I do not have any live classes on Tisha B'Av. So B'ezrat Hashem, this class will be posted online. It looks like this is the final question. I thank you all for joining. Until next time, if Tisha B'Av does indeed come, may everybody have an easy and meaningful fast. May everybody be able to connect, and don't forget to spend a little bit of time, lock yourself up in a room, and really mourn over the Beis HaMikdash, mourn over these lost souls, unfortunately.